Hello there, and welcome to Let's Make a Health Connection, your local Health Connect podcast series in Vancouver, Washington. In this series, we interview and showcase the many healthcare providers and resources that are featured on our website, localhealthconnect.com. For those of you who don't know us yet, Local Health Connect is a hub where our community can easily search local resources and connect with providers for mind, body, and spirit health. Thanks for listening today. I'm Jennifer Barber, licensed clinical social worker in Washington and Oregon, and I practice right here in Vancouver, Washington. Today, I am introducing you to Heather Jolma-Fray. She is a student and accompanist of yoga. Hi, Heather.
Hi, Jen.
How you doing today?
I'm doing good today. It's a beautiful sunny day, and I'm happy to have the time to chat with you here.
Thank you so much for making the time to do this. I'm really excited to jump in and ask you some questions and have our community get to know you a little more.
Thanks, Jen. I'd love to.
I am just going to jump right in and say, what the heck? I'm introducing you as a student and accompanist of yoga and not a yoga teacher. So explain that to us.
Thanks so much, Jen. I identified myself as a yoga teacher for 15 years, and it was really through COVID, extra time that I got at home to dive deeper into my own yoga practice, and considering myself as a yoga teacher really started to come up for me in terms of the training that I had. So if you think about a grapefruit and an orange mixing together, you get this beautiful fruit called an ongelo, something like this. Mm-hmm. So the way that I was taught yoga is a very Western style. I got a stamp of approval by an organization called Yoga Alliance. Yoga Alliance sort of came into the West, came into America, and became the governing body of deciding who was qualified to be a yoga teacher and who wasn't, based on different trainings that they went through here in America. Mm-hmm. And that was all that I knew about when I decided to become a yoga teacher. There wasn't much talk in my training about the fact that yoga in its truest form and in its honest form was born from Hindu people from the Indian diaspora, and that this is where that analogy of the orange and the grapefruit start to come together, because what I was taught to teach was this beautiful crossbreed of this ongelo. So it's neither yoga from its traditional roots of Hinduism or Buddhism or Taoism, from the Indian diaspora, mm-hmm. nor is it Western exercise and breathing. It was a blend of the two. And so what the last year has been for me is about discovering the roots of what I was taught in my Yoga Alliance certified teacher training program. And what I have discovered is that I wasn't taught yoga from a lineage-based perspective, meaning I am detached in my understanding of yoga from it being a Hindu practice. So it's no longer, I feel, correct for me to say that I am a teacher of this really vast, really ancient practice that I literally just know, like, imagine me wiping my finger across the icing, a little sliver of icing on this huge cake. That is what I understand is just this tiny sliver of what the practice is. Now, that little bit is fantastic and highly beneficial, mm-hmm. but I don't feel like it's right for me to claim to be a teacher of something that I truly know so little about, especially without the stamp of approval, really, of someone who should be giving me that stamp of approval, someone who comes from a Hindu tradition. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Very much. Thank you so much. And what I'm taking from all of that for you personally is that you are diving deeper, yes. Right?
Yes.
I know you yes. as a pretty deep person, and you are taking this and you are really going there.
It really felt like, and I had this time to spend doing some studying, And I felt like I had this wonderful opportunity that maybe would have never been afforded to me in terms of time to really do what I wanted to do for hours, several days a week, where I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't running off to work, taking care of young children. And so it started to really feel like a responsibility that I had to be a representative of the practice. If I were to call myself a practitioner or a teacher of yoga, I just wanted to do good by that. And I appreciate you saying that, yes, I am going deep. It does feel like that's what it is. But there's this sort of quality of honesty, and there's a refreshing sense about it, kind of knowing how little I very know and
Mm-hmm.
understand. And so I'm excited to continue to offer the little bit that I know, with the caveat that, I am not a true representation. I'm one little piece of my understanding, but there is this vast body that is incredibly wise and rich. And I want to continue to point to that and to point people toward that. As myself, I learn more about it as well.
So great. Okay. So for people who are listening to this podcast, and we do this podcast to help people decide and kind of get to know the practitioners here in our local area. So if someone is contemplating maybe changing up their current yoga situation, they've been with someone for a while, they want to find somebody else. We're giving them an opportunity to really get to know you and decide maybe they want to see you. So I want you to be able to describe to me. Sometimes people are like, the last thing I want to do is move my body today, right?
So much.
From a yoga perspective, why can it be helpful for us to use our body in yoga?
Thank you so much for asking this question, because I feel that oftentimes myself, the last thing I want to do after either scrubbing the toilets or just kind of being in a depressed state and lounging around, one of the last things I often want to do is to get up and move. And we know scientifically that when we start to move our body, whether it's hopping in the pool for a swim, going out the front door for a walk, or standing up to do some stretching, the muscles in our body have these incredible hormones that are automatically released into the bloodstream by any sort of simple movement that we do. We also know how it feels. Most of us have felt a little endorphin release that we get from taking a jog, from getting our heart rate up by climbing upstairs. There's a moment of exhaustion, but then we get this kind of little buzz or this feeling of like, oh, that felt good.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this lasting impact of those hormones in the body for several hours after we practice or we exercise that can help change our mind, clear our mind, or give us a better perspective than what lounging can often do. So I almost try to always imagine how I'm going to feel when I'm done, if there is that hesitation to want to move my body.
That's a motivator for sure. Imagining that you're going to feel really good afterwards.
Yes, or just trying to remind yourself, I'm going to feel different. I could have a different state of mind simply by moving my body based on the amazing chemistry that's already there. I don't have to ingest anything, I don't have to, I'm not saying that those might not be other good methods, but simply moving my body is oftentimes enough to help me have a new idea or again, kind of change my mind about something. Excellent. And it can be as simple as shrugging your shoulders. We're not talking about doing 20 push-ups. We're talking about this experience of becoming embodied, shrugging the shoulders, noticing your arms, lower arm bones, rolling in your arm. There's some really fantastic ways to get to know yourself better that can come with simple movements that help us feel better for longer periods of time.
Mm-hmm. And that leads really well right into this next question. I'm a little curious about what classes have looked like in this year and a half of pandemic. And as we begin to come out of it, what would a typical class look like a class or a session with you?
Thank you, Jen. For the last 14 months, since COVID closed the studio, and I made the conscious decision to close permanently the middle of last summer when I realized that things weren't going to be able to be quote unquote normal for some time. So I have been teaching 4 classes virtually each week that are really sweet. They're gentle classes. Some of the time we flow with a little bit more heat. There are times where we can spend 5, 10, 15 minutes sitting and chatting about how we're doing, and we almost always rest at the end of class. And that is my plan going forward. As the weather gets nicer, I have a little spot downtown Vancouver near Officers Row where I teach outside under this beautiful tree. But I will, for the foreseeable future, as I prepare to enter nursing school, be offering these 4 virtual classes that anyone can attend, and then also offering outdoor classes. If the weather is nice one week, instead of meeting virtually, we'll meet outside. So you can expect that to be my schedule for the next 4 or 5 months.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. That is excellent. And that space that you're talking about down off of Officers Row is a gorgeous space. Big, beautiful park area.
Yeah, we're pretty lucky to have that space and that I don't have to rent it, that I don't have to get a permit to go there. We can just show up is pretty special.
Yes. So if somebody were to want to show up for that class, how would they sign up for that?
All the information
or any of your classes.
Yeah, thanks so much. I have a website that I update weekly. I check email regularly. I get texts and voice messages on my phone, and I do some social media. So the best place to figure out where I'm at any given time is to check my website, and I'm sure that when people listen to this podcast, they'll see it there. So I have a schedule that's listed on the home page. You can read the description of the class, and then it will let you know right there, we're meeting outside. Click here to send me an email and RSVP your place, or click here to join the class. There are no paywalls that would prevent someone from being able to attend. If you want to make a donation or pay for class, there's that option there. But during this time, anyone can come to class for any amount. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Once you get on the website, you can sort of see, oh, okay, this is where she'll be. I'm going to click here and let her know that I'm coming, or I'm going to click here and join virtually.
Perfect. And we will put your web address in the show notes at the bottom of the podcast. But before we do that, can you just let people know what your web address is?
Absolutely. It's my full name, which is kind of a mouthful even for me to say. So it's just heatherjolmafray.com. And again, if you're like, wait, what is she talking about? I really am only right now seeing maybe 25 or 30 people. And when you call or email, like it's just me. It doesn't go to some, outside source. So you can just call me and say, I don't understand. I'd like to attend. Just know that you're just going to get me on the end of whatever correspondence there is. And I'm happy to walk you through whatever you want to be walked through.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, I am curious. How did you learn about yoga?
Thanks so much for asking, Jen. And I sort of alluded to that a little bit in talking about why I no longer call myself a yoga teacher. And it's kind of a fun story because I like the memory of it. I had heard about yoga. This was maybe 21 years ago or so, and yoga was starting to get popular in the U.S., and this was in the late 90s. I had just had my first child, and my husband was working at the time in a gym as a personal trainer. And so, as young parents of this little kid, we were kind of gym rats. We would just bring our son with us and work out. And there was a yoga class at the gym. And I became a regular attendant at the yoga class because, my son could hang out with my husband while he was training. And one day the teacher moved away, and they just said, hey, we need someone to teach it. And because I was there so regularly, they said, you go ahead and teach. And that was fine. It was simply a routine that I was leading a group of folks through. But as months went by, I started thinking about, hey, I should actually learn what the heck it is that I'm doing and teaching people. I liked it. I really enjoyed doing it. And I found at that time who I consider my root teacher. She opened a yoga studio in Vancouver pretty close to that time. Her name at the time was Yvonne Edez. She has since changed her name to Sundari Sita Ram. And she opened the Shanti Yoga Center. So I started taking classes from her, and we were broke at the time, a young couple with a child. So I would clean the bathrooms and mop the floor for her in exchange for attending classes. And I didn't really understand it at the time. Looking back, it was super obvious, but she was starting to kind of, get me ready to begin teaching for her. Her business at the time was growing a lot, so she needed more yoga teachers. Her and I had developed a wonderful personal relationship. She trusted me. I came late at night and cleaned. I did her money for her. And so it was just a matter of time before she asked me to start teaching for her as well. So I had an interesting experience where I had only been practicing yoga for really just a couple of months before I started teaching. For me, it was really teaching and practicing. It became, they were sort of one and the same. And I like to think I grew up teaching yoga, which makes sense for where I find myself, where I'm at now, right? In so many ways, kind of having the opportunity to go, whoa, what was that? And what is it now as I enter my, mid 40s?
You've come a long way. From scrubbing toilets in a yoga studio to teaching and owning a business. And I mean, my goodness.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, and when I say that yoga has given me so much in my life, it's honestly true. It's given me this whole kind of quote unquote career, and opportunities to be brave when I'd rather be like, I'm not ready for that, or I don't want to do that. So that's kind of when I say I grew up, in the arms of yoga, really, that's what yoga has done for me.
Heather, you are one of the bravest women I know.
Oh,
yeah.
Thanks, Jen.
You're feeling it because you are it. You are it.
Aw.
So
takes one to know one, right?
Thank you. One last question. In your site, it says anyone can do a session or class. Anyone. What do you mean when you say anyone?
I mean folks who may be in a wheelchair, like, oh, I can't stand, I can't do that. We can modify anything. It's more challenging, honestly. It's more challenging if you're limited, if you're injured, if you're unable to move like a quote unquote, person across the street. It is more challenging, but the sweetness that comes from it is so lovely. So when I say anyone, I mean, if you have a heart problem, we can work with that. If you have a frozen shoulder, if you have a tight neck, if you find it difficult to focus, if you don't like staring at a computer screen, a lot of folks will turn off their own camera, and I teach primarily audibly. So if you are a person that can listen and can hear, has that ability. If you're not a listening person, that can be a challenge because I'm not a sign language person, but I'm interested. Like I would be willing to find and pay for an interpreter so that we could do a class together. A person who doesn't do much exercise, or people always tell me I'm not flexible enough to do yoga. And I remind them that's why we do it. We practice sitting down and getting back up so that we become better at sitting down and getting back up.
Yeah. So you're focusing on the physical piece. And I'm wondering about people who I talk to as a mental health therapist, and, occasionally I will suggest a yoga class. And I hear things like, oh, I'm not going to be perfect at it, so I'm not going to do it. Or I've had a history of trauma, and if I'm quiet, the quiet moments are scary, right?
Yeah.
So when you say anyone, how would you comfort someone who had that thought?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And this is where I sort of say, it may end up being where you're like, this is actually not for me. And it could be possible that even that is an insight that I don't even want to say necessarily starts healing, but that insight gives power or recognition, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's also true, I like a class setting for folks who are feeling a little bit less comfortable because one-on-one can oftentimes be a little bit more intense. It can also be extremely healing, but being in a setting where, eyes are not only on you and you're not being judged by your movement. Being in community, whether it's when we're outside in person or virtually, can sometimes just be like, oh my gosh, like it's so easy to feel like I'm the only one who feels this way. I'm the only one who feels uncomfortable in her body. I'm the only one who feels like I can't touch my toes. I'm the only one who's nervous when it gets quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Almost always, many of us have those same experiences. And so what I might say, for example, is lie down if that's a good choice for you. If it doesn't feel good to lie down, here are two other options for what you can do. I'll almost always give options for close your eyes if it feels good to close your eyes. And if you don't, keep them open, but just see if you can let your eyeballs find a spot just out in front of you, down near the ground, that feels easy to look at. And it's through that exploration of what works for me, and I'm talking about me as a practitioner, not me as a teacher, right? So my job is to help give a variety of cues that sort of grab our attention in a way, and it's that grabbing of the attention that starts to heighten our awareness of the moment. So each time we practice, we're not just going through this routine, that makes us feel better or gets us stronger. It's really about coming into the moment, helping the brain remember how to focus on a single point, especially when that point is your forearm rolling. You have two forearm bones in your arm that roll when you move your wrist. What is that like to experience that? So it doesn't, but again, I do, I take great responsibility in if I say I welcome everybody, I think actually there should be a caveat because it could be true that you say to me, this doesn't work, I'm not comfortable. And if that ends up being true, hallelujah. Let's move on to plan B. Maybe I could find somebody else that works for you or even give you an exercise to do at home by yourself that you would check in with me. And that's also the heart of yoga is that it's about relationship and it's about being flexible with what is. So we learn how to be in the world in a way where we can start feeling more comfortable to adapt. We can start feeling a little bit more comfortable that I can trust this person or they can trust me, and giving up ideas that perfection exists, but rather falling in love with that moment where you feel a sense of release or relief. And we try our best, right? This, to not grab and hold. Right, we try to remind each other that life isn't about, this idea of kind of bliss being 24/7. We feel sadness and we feel grief and we are reactive to our trauma. And there's also the possibility often that we can feel glimmers of hope and sweetness and in community, that we're not alone.
Thank you so much, Heather. That's a good place for us to stop. Just that idea of you're not alone, right? None of us
Thanks,
are.
Jen. Yeah, we're not. We're doing this all together. And if COVID has taught us anything, or me personally, I'll speak for myself, it's taught us that what it's like to have people that we can show up as we are with, that we're doing this together.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for talking with us today. And people again can find you at, tell us the website again.
HeatherJolma-Fray.com. You can also find me at thebreathingroomyoga.com. You can Google The Breathing Room. That website will be up for a while longer to help direct all of our folks to myself. And then finding Julie and Deb. Maybe some people listening here are familiar with them. They were also teachers with me at the Breathing Room. So you can find me at either one of those two websites, the Breathing Room or heatherjolmafray.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate you. Thanks, darling.
Bye-bye. Thank you again for listening to Let's Make a Health Connection. Find us on the interwebs at localhealthconnect.com. Also search for us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Links and show notes for this interview are available on our podcast page. I really enjoy putting these interviews together, and I hope you made a health connection. We'll talk again next time.
Let's Make a Health Connection, copyright 2021, all rights reserved, is the exclusive property of MBS Therapy, LLC, a Washington-based company. Local Health Connect is inclusive and does not endorse any political or religious group. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time on localhealthconnect.com.